I was thinking about whether to jump off the roof of my house. That's how real that was for me. I viewed myself differently, and that involved binding my breasts, starving myself. It ended up with me sitting in the doctor's office asking to be referred to have a mastectomy, and I knew that that's where I wasn't going to stop. I wanted a hysterectomy as well. And then I listened to a Jordan Peterson lecture.
What did it feel like in your mind to believe that your real self or you were a boy?
It's intense revulsion towards the female.
Did you feel at all blokey?
What does that mean? Yeah, well...
Do you know if you'll be able to have children?
I don't know.
And these are the permanent effects of puberty blockers that many, many teenagers are taking. Did you do anything that was irreversible?
Yeah.
You're becoming something of a political commentator. Tell me a bit about your background.
Well, contrary to what my name suggests, I'm a working class lass. I've had a state school education. I went to quite underperforming state school. And my childhood was quite deprived. There was a lot of scarcity, and that's informed a lot of my character, I think. But I won a place at Cambridge University and studied English literature. And whilst I was there, I saw firsthand the impact that council culture and the heckler's veto was having on academic life, and staunchly became a free speech advocate / zealot by the time I'd finished there. But I suppose most people know me as someone who's detransitioned, someone who's desisted from gender ideology. So yeah.
So that's interesting. So you started to transition at the age of 13. What kinds of things were you doing?
See, it's hard to talk about the kind of things that you've done to yourself in the public square, because you do have a shame of them afterwards. I think actually a lot of detransitioners just sort of not sugarcoat but skirt round in sort of politest possible terms to spare everyone else listening. And just to list, the things you've done is, in your desperation, it's a strange thing. So I guess to list them, it began in my head. I viewed myself differently, began to refer to myself differently. I gave myself a different name in my own head. Then I created a persona online that was a kind of aspirational self. And so the goal was to make my real self as much like the ideal self that I was online. And that involved binding my breasts, first with sports bras, layering them up, then with bandages, baggy clothes to try and cover what evidence was left after that, starving myself to try and stop my body from developing more than it had, to, I was hoping that my body would start eating the remaining evidence of my womanhood. Gosh, what else? Everything, really. I changed my name. I had a different life in London because I was a theatre kid. So I had a different life in London. I used different pronouns. I had the opportunity to cut all my hair off when I was 18. And so knowing that no one would ask questions of why I've suddenly chopped all my hair off, for context, I had a tumour when I was 18. And all my hair got brittle, started falling out. So I was like, great, I can cut it off and sort of manifest the boy haircut I always wanted with no one asking questions.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, so that's what I did. And then it ended up with me sitting in the doctor's office asking to be referred to have a mastectomy. And I knew that that's where I wasn't going to stop. I wanted a hysterectomy as well. And then I listened to a Jordan Peterson lecture and didn't.
That's incredible. And that's what, I mean, firstly, I'm sad that you feel ashamed to talk about that. I understand that there's a lot of emotion involved, but you were a teenager.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The stupid things we do as teenagers, all of us.
They're stupid things, though, and they're stupid things, right?
But I don't
There's
think there's-
dyeing your hair, and there's not eating, sort of hoping that you'll either die or...
It depends what society you're brought up in. And you know, people who are brought up in a society where you keep slaves. You know, people who are brought up in a society where loads of
Exactly.
young girls are told to do this.
And in the circles that I was in, sort of theatre school circles, queer circles, it was a given that you do these things because this is how you manifest the body you were meant to have but were deprived of by who knows who, because they don't believe in God, but God.
Do you believe in God?
Yes.
Okay. I don't, but many of my guests and audience do, and so I don't want to upset them. And they should pray for me, because people get angry and they're sort of like, oh, well, screw you. And I think, no, they should pray for me so I can come anyway, even though I was wrong.
Oh, see, I'm not the sort of evangelical type. I'm just interested as a... Yeah, we won't go that way.
What did it feel like in your mind to believe that your real self or you were a boy?
See, questions of phenomenology are inherently difficult. That's why there's a whole branch of philosophy devoted to them. And phenomenology, for those at home who have a life, it's the study of the nature of being, the nature of existing and experience. And so what was it like to experience a sense of boyhood, masculinity, that I thought I did? I was looking at everything that women palpably were to me, both in my life, in films, in magazines, and saying, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not this, I'm not that. And looking at the boys in my life, the men in my life, in films, and at like Boy Scouts, and thought, I'm like them because I like doing this and I like doing that. So to reduce it down, it's this kind of intense revulsion towards the female, if you are female, talking about being male. If you're male wanting to be female, it's normally in the disgust towards the male. But it was this disgust towards everything to do with being female. You know, pregnancy, long hair, being married, or, you know, stereotypes, but do originate from a biological foundation that I wanted to utterly reject. It's just not seeing yourself in the characteristic feminine. It's seeing in the same way that you'll look at people in films and you identify character traits. That's much easier for people to understand. You know, oh, I'm brave, I'm courageous, or I'm not brave and I'm you know, anxious about this or whatever. That's more easy to understand. So it sort of has that foundation to it, but it's an underexplored topic, I think.
Did you feel at all blokey?
See now I'm like, what does that mean? Like I was, yeah, well, I mean, I was a proper lout, you know, when I was younger.
Okay.
I had a sort of, it's been watered down now, but a sort of South Londonish accent.
When you came into the studio, you immediately started lying on the floor.
Yeah.
So that's already quite
a feminine thing to do.
I know. I think adventurous.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm just hypermobile when I hurt.
That's true, but it's I like it because I mean, look, I do that a lot as well between sessions. I've got all sorts of back pains. They're going to get worse when you get to my age, 35. And I start what I mean is that showed somebody already who flouts social convention.
Yeah.
So that's maybe something that risk-taking element, because other people might have said, do you mind if I just go and sit on the... But you just went, because you know people won't mind.
I'm not concerned about what people think of me, which is sort of bizarre, because people would think that leaning heavily into gender transition, you're hyper concerned with what people think about you. You think everyone's looking at you and viewing you as the sex that you are, which is the one thing you don't want them to do. And whilst I think that was definitely a component that compounded my distress, for me it was literally that sort of phenomenological experience of disliking who I was and wanting to be something else, almost anything else than female.
You spoke of a slight sort of disgust of womanness. Do you think some of that comes from a fear of having to evolve like a Pokemon into this adult woman and then everything that entails?
Absolutely. And if you look at girls with rapid onset gender dysphoria, which is a new label created specifically for this sort of flash phenomenon that's happened, all these young girls identifying as some persuasion of trans. And the whole experience for me was encapsulated in an instance where a man wolf whistled at me, and I must have been 11 or 12. And by then I'd had like the smallest rumorings of, female body developing, like basically nothing, but I wasn't exactly who I was the year before. And I knew it, but I didn't understand that my developing would change my relationship to society and people around me, and that people would view me differently for it. That was the most distressing thing about it. So before, people would compliment me on how fast I was or how strong I was or innovative I was, my imagination. And then like as soon as I start developing physically, it was like, oh, your hair's nice and long, and you're getting a nice figure and all the rest of it. And it's like, what about the things I was good at before? Why is this a praiseworthy thing? I didn't do anything to change this. So it's a sort of twin trauma that girls go through, where they're hitting puberty earlier and earlier. Most people, so small detour, I did a paper on boy players in the Renaissance period, because girls
who act as
boys who act as girls. Yeah, because girls couldn't be on stage. And I examined how convincing they were as a performance. Now, in comedy, you want that kind of, it's known as the liminal space, where you can sort of see both the masculine and the feminine at the same time, and that's part of the joke. Oh. When you're doing drama, if you're watching two boys kissing on stage, that's not the same as, the lovers of the two households uniting together. It's different. And so they must have been able to convincingly play up. And whilst I was researching this, I found out that basically puberty didn't really meaningfully start until about 17 years old for both sexes. The average age of marriage back then, everyone thinks because, there were child brides within the monarchy and stuff, that everyone was getting married really young, but actually the average age of marriage was about 24, 26.
So puberty was different in the Renaissance time, different age.
Yeah. So someone might get the beginnings, like a bit of, voice breaking or something, but there wasn't anything like meaningfully different about your body until about 17. And then you finished around the age of 24, which is when you get married. Gee, I wonder why. Oh, because suddenly all your sex hormones have kicked in and you want to get with people. But girls are going through puberty younger and younger now. Some starting at the age of like 7 or 8 now.
Sounds like a choice. Well, how is it happening?
So it's something to do with nutrition and body mass. And so if you look at Africa, in the very deprived areas, actually girls start a little bit later than girls in the West because of the malnutrition. You have to be a certain body fat to trigger puberty, particularly in women, because you need the resources to support a baby.
So people in the Renaissance period, apart from the very wealthy there, were really struggling and famished. Relative to now, I suppose.
I think relative to now, maybe it is we're supposed to be that kind of age. It's just that it's getting shunted forward because of the kind of diets that we have. And so that is to say that girls then getting male attention at that age, and boys getting female attention, you were more mentally mature at that point. Plus, you had all of these other factors like you lived in an intergenerational household, you saw your parents, dancing at the village fete, and your grandparents dancing at the village fete, and you had this clear sense of who you were going to become over the course of your life. That's all but gone now. And so girls get this male attention before they are psychologically equipped to deal with it. And it appears to come out of nowhere, but it's not like you wake up and it's like, oh, okay, I've got breasts now. It's so slow. Like, you don't notice yourself getting taller until you look at the mark on the wall. It's the same, for girls developing breasts. You don't notice until your mum's like, oh, we should take you bra shopping. And so when a man wolf whistles at you or makes comments about you online about being sexy or whatever else it is these days, it's like, where has this come from? Why is this suddenly happening to me? I'm no different. This literally never had happened before today. Yesterday, so what's changed? And girls will scour themselves to try and figure it out, assuming that it must be their fault. And then there's a sort of secondary trauma to that, of when you finally discover why it is that you're suddenly getting this sexual attention, it's because of your body, which you can do absolutely nothing about. I tried. Many girls are trying, literally trying to get rid of the organs that are the center of attention for them, and the center of fetishization in our culture.
Is that why you write in your brilliant Substack about an escape that didn't involve death?
Yeah, so that's more to do with the idea of a queer destiny and manifesting your true trans self. So to elaborate on what a queer destiny is, it's essentially this rather pernicious idea that if you are born gay or bi or trans or queer, whatever label you've decided that you are, that is the most important thing about you. It's the defining feature of your existence and governs the trajectory of your life. You exist to be queer. And as a result of that, you can try to suppress it, you can try and minimize its prominence in your life, you can not talk about it, you can not have relationships. Whatever you want to do, it will still find its way to the surface. It will still manifest itself. And so you can either go with it or you can kill yourself, because that's the only two choices. Because if you don't let it be, it festers, and you can't, you're so trapped within yourself, and it's so hideous that your only escape is to kill yourself. But that in and of itself is a manifestation of the queerness, the repressed queerness.
What do you think of that now? That ideology?
Oh my gosh. That'll do it.
Because there are many, many people who are as young as you were and older. I spoke to Ritchie Herron, of course, who's now in his 30s, but he didn't transition until late 20s. So there's many young people, let's say, who seem to buy into that. What do we tell them?
Simply that it's not true, which is very hard to believe at the time, particularly when the whole of society is telling you that it is. The idea of the becoming the queer self, and that if you don't, you will kill yourself, is just an idea. And I'm sort of simultaneously I'm seeing myself in my bedroom that I had at the time, right now, feeling that kind of trapped sensation that I had, which doesn't even cover it. It was so intense. So, for example, the moment I'm currently thinking of embodying is I was so suicidal. I was thinking about whether to jump off the roof of my house. I had a bedroom in the attic. My bed was up against the window, so I could easily climb out. I thought, maybe if I just sit out there for a while, and then if I fall off, that wouldn't be so bad. That's how real that was for me. that distress. So when I say it's just an idea, it is just an idea. Detransitioners are living proof of the fact that with the right help, and the right help is not surgery, it's not drugs, it's therapy, friendship, things that take you out of yourself. It's challenging the ideas that you have of why you think you're a man, why you think you're a woman. What does that even mean to you? And what does that mean in society? What is it about what that prescribes to you that you don't want for yourself? And how can you not have that? You know, you don't actually have to get married. You actually don't have to have children. We have this amazing luxury in our lives now where that's a choice. And we actually have that choice. And people before us have dealt with not having a choice far better than we're dealing with having the choice right now.
It's extraordinary.
Just an idea.
It's this feeling that particularly young girls, I think some boys as well, but it's certainly young girls who suddenly feel sexualized by people wolf whistling at them, men wolf whistling at them. Do you think that presents itself in different ways depending on the society? I'm thinking of anorexia, for example. A lot of teenage girls deal with that. I mention it a lot, but I was in Argentina where exorcism is what happens there. A lot of young girls, they feel like they have a demon inside them. Something has to be removed so that they can continue and be fine again.
No shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
The hormones, they're rough, you know. And I kind of wish that women who were going through pregnancy and going through menopause would talk about that hormonal experience more. You know, the teenage hormonal experience is very brushed off. It's like, oh, you're just angry. But, you know, adults just go, oh, you'll come through it. You'll come through it. And it's like, it's actually true. You will. But you just cannot see it at the time because it's the worst your life has ever been. And you cannot imagine how this could go on forever. And so the locus of the distress kind of doesn't change. The distress is towards the change itself. So the one constant is in fact the change. And it's interesting in the West actually that anorexia, if you look at Google searches, anorexia dips off in 2014. So it's quite high and slowly starts to trend down. In 2014, it's not really that many. Exactly the same time at 2014, trans had been tracking up and then skyrockets. So it's very clear that this desire to control is a constant within the teenage experience. Or to have more relinquish that control, to have freedom. And so I think it kind of depends on the kind of person you are temperamentally, whether you're the person who goes, oh my God, I can't cope with this, I need more control, or whether you're like, oh man, I hate all these new confines that my body's putting on me. I want to lash out and do what I want. Man, that exorcism one's really interesting because I think that's still true in the West, but what you're exercising from your body is different. It's literally the gendered soul and the flesh of your body. You know, you're literally sacrificing flesh to some queer god to give you the body that you want.
I saw that, you know, it was girl after girl because I was surprised by that. I didn't know about any of this at the time. It wasn't involved in the whole trans thing at all. I was just looking at exorcism and I was sort of almost living with this exorcist for some time, and just to document him. It's on the BBC. People can see it there if they want on iPlayer. He was a nutter.
You did that.
He was taking advantage.
You're just some YouTuber now.
Yeah, I'm a YouTuber, but I used to be a proper person. No, this is better. But that he was abusive to the girls. Obviously, you know, it ended up being the case. But these were. All of them had issues that we would see as like maybe OCD, eating issues, all those kinds of things. And they would go, and it makes so much sense looking at it that way. But I didn't understand at the time that might be similar to the whole trans experience. Now I can't stop thinking about it. It's the same thing. These are young people who don't know what they need control. I had terrible OCD as a teenager, so I know a bit about that feeling of control.
Oh, buddy.
Yeah. Oh, fist bump on OCD. Yes. But it was, you know, closing. I was up to like 5 a.m. every night, closing doors, opening doors, light switches.
Light switches.
The bloody light switches.
Oh my God.
It's the weirdest thing because you turn it off. And I didn't have that kind. I don't know about you. A lot of people have OCD where it's like, if I don't do this, something bad will happen. I didn't have that.
No.
So you're the same as me.
It's simply
you just do it.
I can't be comfortable.
Yeah, I won't be able to sleep.
Yes.
Because I'm not sure that light's off, even though it was clearly off.
I
pulled the door handle off my car because I was always convinced I was 17. I was convinced that the car wasn't locked properly. So I'd pull it and pull it and pull it, and the door handle came off in my hand. And that was like, okay, I need to get some help here. But that's the teenager, and I'm sure everybody listening as a teenager had some issue or other, because it's hard. It's really, really hard. Unfortunately, when you say to an anorexic person, yes, you are fat, or as with a trans person, yes, you are in the wrong body, or with a child going through exorcism, yes, you have a demon inside you. Yeah. That's when the adults, unfortunately, have left the room. How did you do anything? And it doesn't sound like you did, but I don't know anything. That's sort of, you can't come back, or it can't change back. It was irreversible.
Yeah. Turns out part of the component of my issues is that I have quite a rare hormonal disorder. So I'm kind of basically allergic to progesterone, which is the second most key female hormone.
Progesterone.
Progesterone.
Never heard of it.
Do you have a wife?
Yes. Has she got some of that?
Yeah.
I'll ask her.
Have you had any kids yet?
No.
No. Okay. When she does, you'll hear all about it.
Really?
It's basically the incubation hormone.
Okay. Everyone's listening now going, what an idiot. How does he have a podcast? He doesn't know about progesterone. But please continue. That's what people like about this show.
Yeah. Yeah. Progesterone boys, ask girlfriends. Yeah, so with this hormonal disorder, it basically is like PMS on steroids. It was like chronic depression, severe, and then sort of suicidality before my time of the month. And it's when I treated that, so much of the gender dysphoria went away, because it's like, oh, my hormones literally aren't.
Wow.
You know, and it seems there's quite a lot of girls who it's not like the biggest overlap of comorbidities, but it's like a noticeable one. And in treating the hormone disorder, I took puberty blockers. I took them at the age of 21, so had, for the most part, physically developed my brain and my organs, so there wasn't too much of a concern with.
How old are you now?
25, 26 next month.
I think.
You just stop counting at some point, don't you? Like, I don't want to know. It's fine.
Yes.
And I knew there was a secondary motive for me pushing for that treatment. It was the gender dysphoria. I knew that the waiting lists for places like the Tavistock were ridiculously long, and I just knew that my ovaries were the source of my problems, and turns out it was.
Yeah.
but this sort of visceral hatred I had for my reproductive organs had a source, but I attributed that source to me being a man and not me having hormone disorder. So I had a secondary motive for wanting to. I mean, I tried almost all the other interventions to deal with this hormone disorder. It's the final stage one is a hysterectomy, which we talked about doing, but the hospital sort of like, oh, let's just wait a little bit longer. So I had.
Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I had puberty blockers, and I've been on them for 4.5 years. I stopped last month because I found out that I had osteoporosis in my spine. There's a question mark over my fertility.
So you did the puberty blockers not to be trans necessarily, but to sort out this disorder. Okay.
But in my own head, it was sort of coupled with, oh, this is a shortcut, to getting trans.
So why did you only stop last month? Did you not, like a year ago, because how long ago did you think, oh, you know what, this trans stuff isn't right?
When I was 21.
About the time you started on the puberty blockers.
Yeah, so it wasn't like a complete sort of cut off in my brain, though it was like the most dramatic change I'd experienced when I saw that first Jordan Peterson lecture. But I still had this real visceral hatred towards my body that I hadn't dealt with, and I realized that I didn't want to be a man, but I still didn't really want to be a woman. So the puberty blockers just seemed like the thing, the way to suppress that womanhood as much as possible, and it has. And so I'm now taking loads of hormones to try and revivify both my bones and my ovaries, but probably screwed them for life now.
Do you know if you'll be able to have children?
No.
You don't know, or you won't be able to?
I don't know.
And these are the permanent effects of puberty blockers that many teenagers are taking. So because we've been told so often that it's reversible.
Yeah, I was one of the people that touted that shit. I they're completely reversible. That's why I should be able to have them. All of these things that are touted by trans activists are completely self-serving because they want to use those things themselves and are trying to justify them by saying, "Oh no, they're fine," and look at this really niche study that I found. And
do you feel unfeminine now? I mean, you look very feminine to the
no.
you don't look at nobody. I mean, the puberty blockers didn't make you look boyish.
No. So I developed my sort of bone structure and everything by then. I probably had some bad fluid retention, which made my face look fat, but that's about it.
Your face doesn't look fat now, but it did it at the time. It looked
yes. Yeah. I mean, I've still got these apple cheeks, but that's just me.
That's just you.
That's just me.
That's not the puberty blockers.
No, it's all me.
What did it feel like? Did you notice a difference? When you take as a girl, or if any girl starts, okay, I'm gonna. And what do you do? Swallow them, put them in, inject them?
Patches and swallow them.
Okay, and then how do you start to feel differently? Do you want to just go down the football, go down the pub and beat up people?
What the puberty blockers? So they are injected. So they're sort of like a grain of rice size implant that dissolves over the course of 3 months. There's a 1 month one as well, but if you're on it hardcore like me, 3 months. And that's just injected on the skin. God, the gauge of the needle, it's like the inkwell of a biro. It's a bitch.
Wow.
Into your abdomen. And if you're sort of skinny like me, you're just jabbing muscle, and that's I suffered for for what I got. And so the way that puberty blockers work, it doesn't change your hormone profile. It doesn't put hormones in or anything. It suppresses the production of the hormone in your pineal gland that tells the rest of the organs in your body, muscles in your body that can produce sex-based hormones to stop. Okay. And so all that happens, whether you're a male or a female, is that all of your sex-based hormones are suppressed. So even if you're a woman, the testosterone is affected as well, which was good because I was an angry motherfucker.
Mm-hmm. So you don't necessarily feel like a big effect. It's just things don't develop.
Yeah. So if you take them as a child, things just don't develop. I imagine so if you don't have a hormone-based disorder like me, removing those hormones will cause depression and anxiety and suicidality. You might get a sort of placebo relief where you tell yourself, "Oh, I'm not going to develop anymore." But you remove the sex-based hormones, you're going to start throwing your brain chemistry out of whack. Now, if you have a hormone disorder like me and you remove that hormone that causes you to feel depressed and suicidal, you're going to feel a lot better. And I did, which is why I stayed on it for 4.5 years.
I see. Okay, that's quite a unique case, I suppose.
Yes.
but nobody, I suppose, warned you that you might not be able to have children, or what?
So this was the thing. I was told it would have an effect on my bone density, but we'll monitor it, and should it get anywhere near osteoporosis, we will stop. Let's just say I'm having some issues on that front with regards to my clinicians. But I was told that the young women who had gone through puberty, who were on this for the same hormone disorders, would have done it for a decade and still been able to have children, no problem. You just need to sort of kickstart your system again, and we'll monitor your organ health to check that nothing's shrinking or rotting. It's so classy. then I sort of hit the crunch point where I had a set of bloods done around the time that I had the osteoporosis diagnosis. And it's like, yeah, your estrogen levels are basically non-existent. So when you suppress the pineal gland, there are other small glands in the body that produce some baseline level of hormones. It doesn't completely eradicate it. Plus, I was taking hormones on top of it to try and preserve some of my fertility and bone density. But this blood analysis came back as basically no estrogen whatsoever in my bloodstream, which meant that no detectable estrogen. So that means that nothing in my body is necessarily being produced. And on top of that, that which I am taking via patches isn't getting absorbed.
Oh,
so
wow.
I've got some question mark over why my body's no longer absorbing estrogen. And if it can't do that, and if I can't get it to start absorbing it again or start producing it for itself again, my bone density will continue to drop, and I very likely will not be able to have children because my body's not producing the hormones it needs to sustain a pregnancy.
How does that make you feel?
I'm fine about it at the moment. I found this out a couple of months ago, and at the time I'd broken up with someone knowing that this was kind of on the horizon, that this might be an issue, and this person, being a father, was one of the most important things to him. And whilst knowing, because he's a good man, he wouldn't leave me simply because I was infertile, I didn't want to rob him of that dream. And it's not necessarily, it's not a dream I've harbored for a long time, but it's as I've developed better relationships with men and just people, was something I could see myself doing and wanting. And so I'd sort of begun to vaguely build up this dream with this person. And so it's not been the greatest blow, because it's like, oh, it's a dream that was, relatively new, and okay, it doesn't happen, and maybe I'll find other ways to make my life fulfilling. But the impact it's going to have on my ability to have the kind of partner that I want, because I want the kind of partner who wants children and has that community outlook and wants to be the provider and thrills in doing that, finds his purpose in that. I want that kind of man. But almost all of those men want children. So unless I can find one that also can't have children, it's going to be difficult. So I'm sort of looking at a life of being quite lonely.
Must have been heartbreaking, though. This was a man you were looking at potentially having children with, and you had to end it for that reason.
Yep.
It sounds like maybe you can still conceive.
Maybe.
When you went to university and all that, you've spoken of a cult of wokeness. Is it a cult?
Yes.
There's no leader as such, is there, or is there?
See, this is a really interesting question, because cults, the defining characteristic of the cult-like behavior in universities and in queer circles is that you can't question the dogma. You go, oh, well, how, why, and you're shut down, thrown out. And progressively, I mean, the barriers keep moving and you have to keep moving with them. Otherwise, you're not progressive. The interesting thing about cults, actually, is that cults are generally regressive. They are trying to recapture a ceremony or behavior or societal structure that existed before and doesn't anymore, but they think that society will be so much better, and they think themselves superior by re-embodying that. And that's not what the universities are like, and that's not what queer cults are like, because it's all about progress, it's the moving forward. Though you could argue that in the trans stuff, the sacrificing of flesh to a divine God is an age-old cult.
Well, the homophobia aspect of telling a boy who might be gay that they're born in the wrong body.
No, yeah, exactly. But I think there are cult leaders within this sort of, particularly, it's the intersectional identity politics, be it queer, race, class, but that's being subverted by being gay and being black. So with regards to the leadership of cults, there seems no apparent leaders as there are when you go, oh, well, the leader of the Ku Klux Klan is this person. And
Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Scientology.
yeah, exactly. And
wait, he's not the leader. I know people are going to comment and say it's David Miscavige is the leader. Tom Cruise is basically the leader, though, because without him, Scientology wouldn't function. But please, sorry.
To those people in the comments, go outside. Go outside.
Touch grass.
You'll love it. The best advice I've ever got.
Yeah.
Mary Harrington regularly tells me, if I'm having a crisis, she's like, if you touch grass, I'm like, no. Yeah, so these leaders, normally there's identifiable figures, and that's how you identify a cult. It's not apparent in intersectional politics, particularly because leaders generally have some sort of motivation for doing so, and a lot to gain from being at the top of the hierarchy within the cult. As a reason they want to sustain it, be it personal power or whatever it is. This isn't apparent in identity politics. My argument is, look at the origins and why this is being propagated
or promulgated.
I
like that one.
Yeah, okay, promulgated. Add that to the dictionary.
Yes.
And you look at the CEOs of Disney. One of them prides herself on having a pansexual child and a transsexual child, and both are like under 10, and it's like, what do they know about sex? So why is she doing that? Oh, well, she just wants her kids to be free and be whoever they are. Sure, if you say so. It's not that she gets this wickedly warm glow of being the best mother in the world because she's so accepting and facilitates her children flourishing like butterflies. There's obviously a personal motivation for her there. Jordan Peterson talks about the devouring mother. It's that kind of instinct.
The devouring mother, that's interesting. So that's let's get into Jordan Peterson then, because so that was a turning point. So before your turning point with Jordan Peterson, what did you think of him?
Nazi.
So how did you, because it's so hard if you and I were now to go into a university full of ideologically captured people and say, hey, come and watch this Jordan Peterson, they would say, no, he's a Nazi.
Well, no, they won't. So this is, well, some of them will, but this was the most surprising thing. So I was at Cambridge when Jordan returned, having been denied his honorary fellowship to come and study for a bit. And it was a couple of years later, and he returned, and he was speaking at the Cambridge Union. And, we thought that we'd get a lot of hecklers, which we did. But the queue to listen to him speak went around the block and formed like 6 or 8 hours beforehand.
Wow.
Students wanted to hear him speak.
Were they woke students? Aha.
They were probably students who appeared to be superficially woke. If they were asked, they would parrot the narratives, but actually were secretly curious. And so I was secretly curious. So I'd been told by, my left-wing circles, oh my God, there's this Jordan Peterson guy. He's like basically a modern day Nazi. That was what they said, basically a modern day Nazi. And then during the pandemic, I was at home and watching philosophy lectures, and then Jordan had come up on the up next. I didn't even click it. It just timed up. And I was like, oh my God, it's that Nazi I've been told about. And I thought, there's no way, this was my thought process. There is no way in the West, in the 21st century, that an actual modern day Nazi would have that kind of platform in a university and online that Jordan Peterson does. So it was only 15-minute like snippet of one of his university lectures. And so I thought, I'll just watch it and see whether it's true that Nazism is having a resurgence in this man in particular. And I got to the end of that 15 minutes and I thought, I don't disagree with a single thing this man just said. So either I'm a Nazi or I've been lied to about him. And what else have I been lied to about?
What were some of the things, do you remember some of the things he was saying? And can you do it in the accent?
No. So many of my friends do. The problem is so many of my friends know Jordan personally and they sort of do the accent.
Yeah.
I'm like, do it to his face. I dare you.
But he apparently is aware that he is a very imitable voice. That Francis Foster said that he spoke to him about this, and that Jordan said he knows that he sounds like Kermit the Frog. Or something.
Well, I mean, he's had the puppet for himself. You know, he leans into it. It's fine. But I love him. I'm not going to do that to him or to myself.
Okay.
Because I love myself now. But I think he was talking about it was questions of truth and what we sacrifice either in pursuit of the truth or in neglecting it, and that you have to pick one. You can't abstain. It doesn't work like that. And so either speak the truth and whatever happens is supposed to happen, or don't, but know that then you're sort of manipulating the trajectory of the universe into some essential sense. But his diktat of just tell the truth and see what happens. And in that moment, I sat there and said to myself, I don't think getting full gender transition surgery is going to stop me being unhappy. And that changed everything because I'd had small doubts. I'd been told that the reason I'm still unhappy is because I haven't gone the full hock yet. And I had plans to do so because I wanted to be happy. But I had small doubts because you adopt a new stereotype of the sex you're trying to be. So you cut your hair short, you wear man's clothes, these kinds of things. You do get what they call trans joy, trans euphoria. And it's because you've adopted the stereotype and you think you're one step closer and you feel good for anywhere between like a day and 2 weeks. But then the crushing depression comes back. And so I'm blessed to be self-aware enough that I noticed that pattern. And so when he said, tell the truth, see what happens, I thought, I can't keep doing this. Let's see what happens if I don't transition. Let's see what happens.
It's such a simple message, but one that we need to hear sometimes. Do you feel angry at some of the people who enabled you in what we now know as a mass delusion? I know you might not want to speak about specific members of your family or anything like that, but doctors, teachers, people who were supposed to be looking around the next corner for younger people. I almost never feel anger now. I made an exception over the sort of Southport killings. I lost my mind for about a week, but I've not been that angry in a long time. It was the stabbing of 3 young girls, for anyone who doesn't know. I feel like down, not angry, because I think almost all of the people that I encountered was also swept along thinking that this was a good thing. I don't really think I encountered maybe 1 or 2 people in the theatre world, but I don't think I ever really encountered anyone who was intentionally like, I believe in this and everyone's going to fall in line behind me. So in that regard, I'm sort of blessed. If I'd have gone into the Tavistock, it might have been a different story, as Ritchie is a kind of sad memento too. Why are those who detransition relegated to the bottom of the hierarchy Olympics and the woke mindset?
they counteract the whole edifice. So it's a game of Jenga. You have to believe in one principle to then have the second one, to have the third one, to have the fourth one. And so a detrans person is someone who pulls out one of the bottom blocks of the Jenga tower, and people then rush to hold it up. But that's not how the game works, and they're in fact cheating. So why is there such animus? Why are they at the bottom? They are asserting fundamental biological reality, which is something that philosophy in general is trying to turn away from. We don't like being mortal. We don't. We don't like the fact that if we don't eat, we starve. We don't like the fact that we have to sleep because then we have to stop doing what we want to do. We don't like the fact we eat junk food, we get fat. There are parameters to reality. Physics is real, guys. And detrans people say, actually, I think there's something to this biological sex malarkey. I don't think actually we can do much about it. And detrans people are actually quite forthright about defending stereotypes, even though often they contradict the stereotypes themselves. They go, actually, the idea that women in general want to be mothers and like to be in nurturing roles and would secretly prefer to cultivate a home and cook food rather than sit at a desk turning grey working for some faceless organisation. It's not to say women don't like work, but these are old arguments that we don't need to go into. But trans people, detrans people, sort of point to these things and go, they're not wholly stereotypes. And people don't like that. That's what feminism's been moving against for quite a long time, which is why they're not quite as low as the feminists, because the feminists are against the trans stuff too. But maybe there's more animus towards the detrans people rather than simply the gender critical feminists, because they're frustrated of us providing evidence for the gender critical feminists.
It's really interesting though about feminism, because I interviewed Julie Bindel, who sort of had to admit while I was interviewing her that she's had to change her tack, because back in the day she was one of the feminists saying men and women are the same and men and women can do women can do all the things men can do and vice versa. And she now is going completely the other way and saying, well, hang on, you can't have women in men's sports because men and women are so different. And I asked her about that, and she admitted, I think I was wrong then. It's a complicated one. Did you, after that Jordan Peterson lecture, did you sort of want to go around telling friends, other students about it? How did people respond to you as your politics changed?
I'm quite a determined person. So whatever I kind of decide I'm going to do, I'm going to do. So when it was trans, it's like, I'm going to trans. But when it was like, I'm going to detrans, it was I was going to detrans. So I didn't wait for anyone's permission. I didn't have many friends at the time anyway, because friends in those circles tend to be superficial because of the necessity to uphold the ideology. And so all your relationships are vaguely synthetic. So I just stopped doing the things I was doing before. So I let my hair grow out, started wearing clothes in which you could sometimes see my figure, stopped using my pronouns. I was going by he, them by the time I was decided to do trans.
He, them.
Because apparently you can be trans and non-binary at the same time. I can't work it out now. I don't know how
it made sense.
Yeah, but at the time it made sense. I've no idea how that works now.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I think sometimes to try and understand that, I think of languages, because I used to speak French better than I do now. I was in a relationship with a French woman for years who didn't speak a word of English, and I sometimes have this idea in my head of, imagine if I were a fly on the wall of, say, an argument that we had 15 years ago. I wouldn't be able to understand myself speaking now, some of the words I was using. And I suppose, is that how you feel? Like you were using different language?
There is like an altered state of consciousness between then and now.
Who was this person? Who were we? What is happening? Where will we go?
I don't know anymore. I was talking to my dad about this last night, about the strangeness of aging, how simultaneously at any given moment when you're talking to someone that you've had a long-term relationship with, like your parents, that when you talk to them, you're simultaneously talking to them as you are now, but you can at any moment sort of vaguely drop into like your teenage self, and then your very infantile self.
Mom.
Yeah. But it's not even in the behavior, it's just the way in which you understand your relationship with them. And when I talk to my dad, I simultaneously am envisioning my sort of 5-year-old self and the relationship I had with him then. And it's sort of the same with the gender stuff. It's like simultaneously you know exactly who that person was and you're vaguely still that person, but not. It's this old state of consciousness.
Had you continued down that path, like many other girls in their teens do, what would have been the next? How would it have gone to its completion?
The gender transition. I don't think I would have got a phalloplasty. I wasn't that committed. Because I think fundamentally I knew I didn't actually want to be a man. I am very masculine temperamented in a sort of clinical sense, but I didn't want to be a man. I knew I had a vague awareness that actually men have a pretty rough time as well, which a lot of
finally I'm a victim. People should start realizing what I've had to go through being a man.
And so I personally don't think I would have got a phalloplasty, but I certainly wanted all my sex organs removed, probably even my vagina. I didn't want to have sexual relationships, and so I think that's as far as I.
And they would have done that gone. For you, the doctors.
Probably.
And the breasts off.
Yes, that was the first thing.
No, you would have done that first.
Yeah, though that was the. Well, interestingly enough, the tumor that I had was a breast tumor. So the darker side of my brain was like, maybe I can lose them this way.
Oh man. Are you happy you didn't?
No, yes.
And all of the stuff. Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh. I'm just got a sort of gnarly scar now because I had to have some breast tissue removed. But yeah, I was the dark side of my brain was like, I don't think I want to die, but if I could lose them this way, that would be really helpful.
Do you know many detransitioners or many people who've gone through with it, women who've gone through with it, who are, it's like, what's gone on with my body?
No. And I think it's partly because I started doing a lot of this stuff before it was a big fad. So I started, like you said, 13, which would have been
13 years ago,
2011. And as with the sort of search engine trends, it became an internet phenomenon around 2014. So I was in very small niche chat rooms on things like Tumblr, where all the same stuff is parroted, but everyone was still exploring what the hell this was. And what we do about it. Now it's prescribed, first you do this, then you do this, and this is what you have to say to get this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you live your best queer life. And so I didn't meet many people like me, which is maybe part of the problem and maybe actually part of the saving grace. And I can't say I have many. If you look at girls, actually, interestingly enough, almost none of them are actually going the full man thing.
Interesting.
So even like Chloe Cole, who went significantly further than I did in a short space of time, she talked about sort of autogynephilia, which almost no women identifying as trans tend to have. So she was quite a unique case in that regard. But she did an extended interview with Peterson, and she kind of revealed herself not to be particularly clear about whether she actually wanted to be a man in a physical sense beyond this fetish that she had. It was more about the social perception and the control and the escape from the femininity. Actually, if you look at, so I'm writing a piece, ironically enough, on how the feminists have rejected the stereotypes and are now adopting them again. And I'll have to watch your interview. And the, oh gracious.
Oh, gracious.
Oh, gracious. Goodness gracious me. So the piece I'm writing on about feminists not being rejecting gender stereotypes for decades and now quickly adopting them again. They God again. I find him repeating myself. I forget what I was going to say.
What could the point be about?
It was the way I'm going is footballers, right? You need a blooper reel for me.
Yeah, we should.
So you got Connor Tomlinson who comes out like blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Scattergun. Bloody hell. I don't know how he talks like that.
Oh my
gosh. He does
it. He's really not much better in real life. A little bit slower, but not much.
Bloody hell.
So I'm actually writing a piece on how feminists have rejected, like Julie Windham said, gender stereotypes and having to rapidly take them up again. And in it, I was looking at the number of trans athletes at the Paris Olympics. And obviously there was that controversy around the two boxers competing in a female category of ambiguous sex, probably various persuasions of intersex. Persuasions as if it's a choice, it's not, it's genetic. And obviously there's not many trans women, biological men, because they do have to meet a certain threshold. That threshold should probably be higher still, but they don't meet a certain threshold. But there are quite a few trans men, biological females, who in fact aren't trans men, don't identify as trans men, they simply identify as trans, which means I'm not feminine, I'm not a female, don't you dare tell me that I'm female, but I don't know what I am. So they tend to go the non-binary route. I'm trans non-binary. So I don't conform to gender stereotypes and I find being a female very distressing, so I'm trans non-binary. There's really not that many women who go and have the full surgeries. Top surgery is very popular. That's because that tends to be the first sign that you're becoming a woman. That's the first place in which the sexual attention is directed when you're young. So women do that a lot more. And the puberty blockers, because no girl wants to have a period and it stops them. But I really don't know many girls that have had phalloplasties.
So it does seem to be more about stopping
it's not being female rather than being male.
The traumatic step into adulthood.
And you've got to remember that almost all of these girls are autistic or ADHD, which affects your ability to interpret what society expects from you anyway and conform to it with any regularity. And sexual assault, sexual trauma in childhood and in adolescence is a huge overlap for so many of these girls. It's getting, they're literally cutting away the touch of their abuser's fingers with these surgeries. That's what it is fundamentally, but we're letting them do it because that's easier than talking about the sexual trauma. That's easier than talking about the fact that it's easier than talking about pedophilia. It's easier than talking about the fetishization of young girls. It's easier. That is easier.
I think a lot of people need to hear you speak, so I hope they do. Where can people find your Substack and things like that?
Oh, well, this is the bit I'm supposed to rehearse, isn't it?
Well, you should remember where your stuff is.
Yeah, it's only in two places. So I have a Substack where I list all the publications that I write for. So I don't tend to write original stuff on my Substack, but my Substack, Charlie Bentley Astor. I write for The Critic magazine, European Conservative, The Telegraph. Got some new places in the works. And you can find me on Twitter at @Astor_Charlie.
Fantastic. Who is a heretic you admire?
See, I knew this question was coming. So the first people that came to mind were Helen Joyce, Mary Harrington, Connor Tomlinson, Jordan Peterson. But the secondary response that my brain had was not any one person, but a type of person. And I think a heretic today is the person who doesn't let themselves get jaded by everything that goes on, doesn't let themselves get disconnected from their community, who don't get swallowed by social media, the people who can, in spite of everything, continue loving passionately, unambiguously. They're my heretics.
It's a beautiful sentiment. People, please go follow Charlie Bentley Astor on X. Go and look at her Substack and find all of her work there. She's absolutely wonderful. She's given us her time. And so please also share this video around, because I think a lot of people need to hear this. Hit like, keep watching the channel.